how we could keep moving on our preventive aspects that not only help women, but help the men who so love us and support us, and we want to return the favor by making sure they get their screening too. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I'm pleased to be able to join my colleague from Maryland to try and point out how this issue is being manipulated. Almost 2 years ago, Congress, this institution, voted to end discrimination against women by health insurance plans. We voted to make it easier for women to seek referrals to see the health specialists they need. And we voted to give women greater access to affordable, preventive health care services, including contraception. These are important, historic advances for women's health, and they should not fall victim to ideological policies. Over the last several weeks, we've seen women all across this country stand up in huge numbers to support women's health. That grassroots support will be needed again and again to stave off ideological attacks on women's health care. Over the past year, House Republicans have repeatedly attempted to both eliminate funding for Title X family planning and to defund Planned Parenthood. Thankfully, we've been able to block these attempts in the Senate. 97% of the reproductive health services provided by Planned Parenthood in New Hampshire and across the country are preventive care. And as we all know, preventive health care lowers health care costs and saves lives. We were reminded of the important role Planned Parenthood plays in preventive health when the Susan G. Komen Foundation decided to end its contracts with the provider. It's unfair to politicize women's health in the way we saw played out in the media last week. Women from across the country let their voices be heard. The 750,000 women who received breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood clinics with support from the Komen Foundation deserve better. They didn't ask to be thrown into the political fire. They merely sought detection and treatment against a life-threatening disease. I'm pleased that Komen reversed that decision. I also commend the President for standing up for women's health and reaffirming the recommendation of the Institute of Medicine to protect access to affordable birth control for all women. The decision requiring health plans to cover contraception with no copays or deductibles will improve the lives of millions of women and their families. Birth control pills can cost up to $600 a year. It can be a serious economic issue for some women. Studies have shown that it costs employers as much as 17% more to exclude contraceptive coverage in employee health plans than to provide such coverage. Birth control is also a fundamental health care issue. Doctors and public health experts agree that increased access to birth control prevents unintended pregnancies. It is directly linked to declines in maternal and infant mortality and a reduction in the risk of ovarian cancer. It is linked to overall good health outcomes. Permanent and temporary contraception is critical for family planning purposes, but many women, a full 14%, use birth control for medical and health reasons, including helping to reduce the risk of some cancers, treatment for endometriosis, serious infections, and cysts. Now, let's be clear. In talking about the health benefits of birth control, I'm not telling women that they must use it. The decision on whether or not to pursue contraception is an individual choice that each woman must make for herself, with her family. No part of the Affordable Care Act or the President's ruling regarding insurance coverage forces any woman to use contraception. However, birth control will now be affordable and accessible for any woman who, in consultation with her doctor, decides that she needs or wants to use it. The policy represents one of the greatest advances for women's health in decades. Sadly, there's an aggressive and misleading campaign to deny this benefit to women. A conscience clause exists that exempts religious institutions, like churches, from having to carry insurance that covers contraception. 335,000 churches and their employees in this country are exempt. Now, many have argued that that conscience clause should be expanded to include religiously affiliated hospitals and universities in the name of religious liberty. The millions of women who work in a Catholic hospital or university, from the overnight nurse to the classroom aide or cafeteria worker, who choose to use birth control should have the same access as their counterparts at other institutions. That is their decision. It is not their employers. There are religions that believe divorce is a sin. Should these institutions be exempt from our labor laws and be allowed to discriminate based on marital status? Of course not. And this is no different. A recent survey showed that 71% of American voters, including 77% of Catholic women voters, support the requirement to make birth control available to all. They understand that religious freedom means that all women, Catholic or non-Catholic, should have the opportunity to make their own decisions when it comes to birth control. I applaud the President for his decision and for putting women's health above politics. Now, we know that ideological attacks on women's health care will continue, but I thank my colleagues who are here today for speaking out against those who want to turn the clock back on women, who want to limit access and availability of women's health services. We are watching, and we are going to continue to be watching. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, last week we saw something amazing happening in communities across the country. When the news got out that the Susan G. Komen Foundation had cut off funding for breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood, men and women across this country were just outraged. They didn't understand the decision, they didn't agree with it, and they did something about it. They picked up their phones, they talked to their friends, they emailed, they tweeted, they called their elected officials, they made their voices loud and clear, and they got results. On Friday of last week, Komen did the right thing and announced they had reversed their initial decision, and I really want to commend them for that, because their mission and their great work in the fight against breast cancer is just too important to get mixed up in partisan politics. But, Mr. President, although that reversal was a great victory for so many women and men across the country, let's be clear. Our fight for women's health care didn't end there. there are still many who continue to push partisan politics ahead of women's health, and we need to make sure that the grassroots support and energy that successfully came together to right that wrong last week continues to stand firm against each and every attack that comes our way. Because, Mr. President, we do know those attacks are coming. Republicans in the House of Representatives have been waging a war on women's health since the moment they came into power. After campaigning across the country a year and a half ago on a platform of jobs and the economy, the first 3 bills that they introduced were direct attacks on women's health in America. The very first one, H.R. 1, would have totally eliminated Title X funding for family planning and teen pregnancy prevention. It included an amendment that would have completely defunded Planned Parenthood and cut off support for the millions of women in this country who count on it. Another one of their opening rounds of bills would have permanently codified the Hyde Amendment and the D.C. abortion ban, and the original version of their bill didn't even include an exception for the health of the mother. And finally, they introduced a bill right away that would have rolled back every single one of the gains we made for women in the health care reform bill. Their bill would have removed the caps on out-of-pocket expenses that protect women from losing their homes or their life savings if they get sick. It would have ended the ban on lifetime limits on coverage. It would have allowed insurance companies to once again discriminate against women by charging them higher premiums or even denying women care because of the so-called pre-existing conditions like being pregnant. And, Mr. President, it would have rolled back the guarantee that insurance companies cover contraceptives, which will save the overwhelming majority of women who use them hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year. Now, we know that ensuring access to effective birth control is directly linked to declines in maternal and infant mortality, to reduced risk of ovarian cancer, better overall health outcomes for women, and far fewer unintended pregnancies and abortions, which is a goal that we all share. And, Mr. President, contraceptive coverage shouldn't be a controversial issue. It is supported by the vast majority of Americans who understand how important it is for women and families. And I also want to note that the affordable contraceptive policy we put in place preserves the freedoms of conscience and religion for every American. Churches and other religious institutions are exempt, and no doctor would ever have to dispense contraceptives if that's at odds with his or her religious views. But it also protects the rights of the millions of Americans who do use contraceptives, who believe that family planning is the right choice for them personally, and who don't deserve to have politics or an extreme minority's ideology prevent them from getting the coverage that they deserve. So I'm very glad, joining with all of my colleagues, that we beat back that effort by the House Republicans. And I truly want to commend President Obama for moving forward with this sound policy for women across America. Because, Mr. President, what this is really about, it's what it needs to be about, women and their health care needs. Not partisan politics, not point scoring. House Republicans and their allies have demonstrated they will stop at nothing to politicize this issue. Last year, they even threatened to shut down the federal government in a failed attempt to defund an organization that provides critical health services for millions of women in this country. And now they're trying to cut off contraceptive coverage for women across America. Well, they can keep trying to push their extreme agenda, but they should know we are going to fight back just as hard. Right here in the Senate, as we clearly saw this past week, with the voices of millions of people across America who feel very strongly that politics should never come between a woman and her health care. Men and women who will be watching what is happening here in D.C. and who I'm confident stand ready to act again. So I'm proud to be here with my colleagues today. I'm proud of the victory of last week, and I'm determined to remain vigilant and keep up the fight for women, for men, and their families. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The Senator from California.
Mr. President, I am also very proud to be here with my colleagues. I think Senator Murray was eloquent, Senator Shaheen, Senator Mikulski, and I'm here to put it in my own words, and that is, here they go again. Sadly, politics has once again entered into women's health care. This time, we see an attempt to deprive women of a critical benefit, access to contraception, through their health insurance plans. Just last week, what did we see? A move to punish women by taking away their free breast cancer screenings, all because of right-wing politics. Before that, as Senator Murray eloquently indicated, we saw a Republican move to defund family planning because of politics. My Republican colleagues almost shut down the government over family planning, and now, if they have their way, millions of women could lose their contraceptive coverage, which could expose them to declining health outcomes and their babies to declining health outcomes, and could cost them about $600 a year. Let's step back and look at where we are. Some months ago, the Institute of Medicine, which is a number of leading scientific and health experts, made a decision. They advised the Obama administration on what preventive benefits should be included for women, specifically for women, in new health insurance plans. That's what this whole to-do is all about. This organization that has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with health care made a very clear recommendation to the Obama administration. They said there's a number of preventive benefits that should be included for free for women of this country. Screening for gestational diabetes, HIV screening, cervical cancer prevention, annual well women visits, and access to contraception. And now, just as these women, our women of this nation, are ready for these preventive services, services they need, services most of them want, my Republican friends, from presidential candidates Romney to Newt Gingrich to the Senate and House Republican leaders, I heard Senator McConnell threaten legislation to take away these benefits, to Speaker Boehner, to individual Republicans in both houses, they're gearing up to repeal one of these benefits, access to birth control. Access to birth control. Now, I believe women in this country deserve respect. Some of them don't want access to birth control. They have a religion that dictates their views, and they have every right to make that decision. And others decide that they need to have access to birth control. So the Obama administration says to the women of this great nation, they believe there ought to be access. But I think it's very important. The Institute of Medicine said no exception. They think access to contraception is so important to women's health, they didn't want any exception. But the Obama administration made an exception for churches, for religious institutions. And under the Obama administration's rule, 335,000 religious organizations will not have to offer birth control if they have a conscience reason not to do so. That is a compromise. Remember, the health experts said no exception. The Obama administration said, well, I want to respect the religious institutions, and so I will allow them, if their mission is religious and the people they serve are basically of one religion, and the employees that they hire, they're a religious institution, they will not have to offer contraception in the health care benefits to their employees. But guess what? There's another part of this equation. Women. Women. They have to have their religious beliefs respected. And that is why the President also said, if you run an organization that serves a diverse number of people from different religions and so on and different beliefs, let them have the right to make that decision if they want to obtain free birth control through their insurance. Now, here's the thing, Mr. President, this outcry is astonishing to me. Since 28 states already assure access to birth control, I have never heard any of my colleagues, maybe they did come on the floor and complain, but more than half of our women, over 28 states, more than half of women have access to birth control. So this isn't some new benefit. This is just making sure that all women, except that very narrow band that work for strictly religious institutions, have the right to have access to free birth control. And the outcry is unbelievable. A political outcry making this a political issue when it is a medical issue. President compromised. He said, you're strictly a religious institution. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. Now, here's the other thing. All organizations that have any religious issue have an extra year to determine if they're going to offer this or how they can do it. They may be able to find a way in that year to get women access and at the same time not violate their conscience. They have an extra year to do that. But oh no, we're going to see legislation, I could assure you, we're going to see legislation to overturn this, legislation that even goes further than this, and it's going to be a battle here on the floor of the Senate, I'm afraid. I'm not afraid of the fight. I welcome it. Because let's be clear, virtually all women have used birth control at some point in their lives. Let me repeat this. Virtually all women have used birth control at some point in their lives, including 98% of Catholic women. That's the fact. And 71% of American voters, including 77% of Catholic women voters, support the administration's policy. So if my colleagues decide they're going to take this issue on in the face of overwhelming support for this policy by the American people, I say we're ready. We're ready to make the case. Access to birth control is directly linked to maternal and infant health. This isn't some theoretical right. It's a right that is necessary. Health experts tell us that women with unintended pregnancies are less likely to get prenatal care in the first trimester, and in some cases, they never get it. And, Mr. President, if there is one thing that should unite us, it's healthy babies, healthy outcomes from healthy pregnancies. And that's what we're talking about. So, I want to talk about something else we don't hear enough of. And I want to compliment Senator Gillibrand on this because she's the one who brought this issue to my attention. A full 14% of women who use birth control pills, that's over 1.5 million women, use them to treat serious medical conditions, Mr. President, not to prevent pregnancies. What are those conditions? Debilitating monthly pain, irregular cycles, conditions like endometriosis, serious skin conditions. I just learned of a young woman at Georgetown. Georgetown University did not offer this free insurance policy regarding birth control. Her doctor told her she had a serious medical condition and she needed to use birth control pills. It had nothing to do with pregnancies or anything else or preventing pregnancies. It was serious medical condition. And the diagnosis was, I may not say it right, polycystic ovary syndrome. Now, what happened is she was told, you must go on birth control pills, but we at Georgetown, we won't pay for that benefit. She had to go out and do it. It was more than $100 a month, and she couldn't afford it. Within months, she developed a large ovarian cyst that had to be removed surgically, and in addition, she lost an ovary. So please don't stand here and tell us that women don't need access to birth control pills or contraception, because we have story after story after story. And let me tell you something else, Mr. President, some folks may not know. And that is that in many occasions, when a woman wants to become pregnant and has irregular cycles and can't, she will be put on the birth control pill. And a British scientific study came out and showed that after 5 years on birth control pills, women who had this problem were able to become pregnant and become mothers. So this isn't some simple pat statement. This is about making sure that the women of this country, the young women, the middle-aged women of childbearing age, and older women who have other conditions, get the medicines that they need. And by the way, get them for free. $600 a year for many middle-class and working poor women is just out of reach. Out of reach. So I say to my Republican friends who came to the floor previous to our statements, don't punish women again. Don't try to. Under the administration plan, churches are respected and women are respected. All sides are respected. No one is forced to use birth control. It is up to the women. 28 states, more than 50% of the women already have this benefit. Why are you bringing politics into this? My Republican friends want to turn back the clock on birth control. Some of us remember the days when birth control was illegal. Well, I have news for them. This is the 21st century. Wake up. Look at your calendar. It's the 21st century. And women ought to be respected, and women ought to be trusted, and their families ought to be trusted and respected. And we are not going quietly into the night on this one. We will be here. We will fight back. We will fight for women and their families and health care. And we will fight to keep politics out of the equation. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
The senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I come to the floor now as a father and a grandfather. Bonnie and I have 5 daughters and grandparents of 8 granddaughters. Nothing in our family and nothing in families across this country have anything more critical in their minds than the health of their children, their daughters, and our families. Women in this rich country have a right to expect affordable, quality health care, but those rights are under attack here. And the attack is coming from what I call the male-oligarchy. Several years ago, I initiated the name male-oligarchy right here on the Senate floor. A male-oligarchy is made up of men in Congress who always decide what they want to do for women, even taking away their rights. And these days, the male-oligarchy has declared war on women's health. We saw it when the Republicans in the House tried to defund Planned Parenthood. And now we're seeing it again this week in the Republican efforts to take away affordable birth control, basic health care for women in our country. Under an historic provision of the health care reform law, health insurance companies will be required to cover conception with no additional copays or fees. This landmark requirement is scheduled to go into effect this summer. But as women cheer this new law, the male oligarchy is looking to take it away. Here in the Senate, there's a Republican bill to get rid of these benefits for women. Imagine. This body, principally made up of males, wants to take away benefits for women. The top presidential candidate on the Republican side is Mitt Romney. He just said one of the first things he'll do, I heard it, everybody heard it, was loudly broadcast, vividly broadcast on television. He will do, as the first thing, if elected, is overturn these new policies, making birth control more affordable. Imagine. That's his promise. That's why he wants to be elected. I hope the American public is listening carefully to what's being said. Mr. President, affordable birth control shouldn't be controversial. I thought we put this question to rest long ago. Back in 1965, the Supreme Court overturned the state of Connecticut's ban on contraception. And today, 99% of women either use birth control or have used it at some point during their lives. It has become a critical component of health care for women in our country. But as so many women know, birth control is also significantly expensive. 1/3 of all women have struggled to pay for it. And even if you have health insurance, it's a struggle. Co-pays for birth control can be as much as $50 a month. $50 a month adds up to $600 a year. And now, the other side wants to take this benefit away. President Obama and many of us in Congress believe that's fundamentally unfair. Mr. President, everyone needs to speak up against this attack on women's health, just as they did last week when the Komen Foundation, a foundation that was founded carrying the name of a young woman, Susan Komen, who died of breast cancer. When that foundation allowed a partisan agenda to cancel its mission to fight breast cancer, imagine that. This organization named for a woman, a young woman, who died. And now they want to cut out these examinations for women to see whether or not breast cancer is ahead for them. Komen tried to cut funding to Planned Parenthood, a trusted provider of life-saving breast cancer exams for hundreds of thousands of women in our country. Across America, women were offended, hurt, and angry, so they spoke up and spoke out against Komen's narrow-minded decision. People were outraged, and justifiably so. Mr. President, I was proud to bring together more than 24 of our Senate colleagues to join the fight. We persuaded Komen to see the error of their ways, and they reversed their decision a few days later. Now, the Komen Organization and Planned Parenthood are getting back to do what they do best, protecting women's health. Let's be clear. It would have been wrong to take away resources that could save their lives, just like it's wrong to deny the women the right to affordable contraception. So I call on my Republican colleagues, disband that male oligarchy view. Join us and stand up for women in our country. Politics don't belong in our doctor's offices, our examining rooms, or our medical clinics. Politics should never be used to block women's rights to get the care that they need for healthier lives. And I ask my friends on the other side of the aisle, consider what you're doing before you vote to take away those rights. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to rise today after my distinguished colleagues have spoken on this issue so powerfully and eloquently, and I do so reluctantly because I rise in the face of a continuing assault on women's health care in this country, an assault on women's health care that is unworthy of our political system, because individual decisions by women should be made by them. They are a matter of their conscience and their choice. Politics has no place in health care decisions. This assault is waged by a group on the radical right. It's an ideologically based attack into personal health care decisions of women and their families, and they're wasting taxpayer dollars to do it. The ideological based stand on women's health care over these years is nothing less than unconscionable and unbelievable. I've only been in this body for a short time, but one of the first votes that I cast was on H.R. 1, which wasn't about growing jobs or strengthening our economy. It was known best for completely eliminating the funding of responsible family planning programs. Now, the fact is that family planning can prevent unintended high-risk pregnancies, reduce abortion rates, and they are cost-effective. They provide $4 of return for every dollar that is spent on family planning, invested in those programs. But there are some on the radical right who would rather have the people of our nation pay $11 billion a year in unplanned pregnancies rather than receive a nearly threefold return on investment for family planning services. This debate is about more than dollars and cents and more than cost. It is about protecting the right of every woman to receive good quality preventive care and equal access to preventive health care benefits from the provider they trust. And these decisions should be made between the provider that a woman trusts and herself. In 2010, Congress took a great step forward that my colleague, Senator Mikulski, has described so powerfully. A decision to require that health care plans cover a core package of preventive health services, moving our country dramatically and historically toward a trend of overall lifetime health. The Institute of Medicine, an unbiased scientific organization, was tasked with evaluating the most important preventive services to include in the best health outcomes for women, seeking those best health outcomes for every woman in America. This scientific organization named birth control as one of those core benefits. Birth control, and let's be very clear, we are talking about birth control, the pill that 99% of women use as part of their daily preventive health care at some point in their lives. 99% of women use it. That very same benefit, coverage for it, is guaranteed by 28 states around the nation. They already require health care plans to cover it, and more than half the women of our nation live in those states. Now, the radical right would seek to take away that guarantee, that coverage, that basic health care outcome. Take away that right, repeal it, restrict it, remove it as an option for women. That is unacceptable. Women spend an average of $500 per year for birth control, a cost that men will never have to incur, and that is why the Institute of Medicine recommended that birth control be included as part of the package of preventive services without copays, because cost should not be a barrier to those 99% of women in the United States who use birth control. And yet, the radical right has decided that the politics of taking birth control away from women is more important, and they've used every tool in their arsenal, creating misunderstandings, to try to take this right away from women, including misrepresenting what the administration has decided to do. One of these mistruths that they are spreading is that churches will be required to offer birth control. Not so. Another is that institutions affiliated with churches will be required to provide those services. Not true. What any institution is required to cover is, in fact, the coverage, not necessarily provide the service. And that is a key distinction. The majority of Americans agree that employers would be required to provide that employers should be required to provide their employees with health care plans that cover contraception and birth control at no cost. The majority of Americans believe that is true. Nearly two-thirds of young Americans of childbearing age agree that employer health care coverage should include birth control at no cost. In short, this decision should be a matter of conscience, a matter of choice for individual women. Politicians should not be permitted to exploit it, as some are doing now. I stand for women making choices about their own health care. And I stand against politicians telling them what they should do. This issue before this body and this nation is one of the critical issues of this time, and politics has no place in these health care decisions. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. The senator from Pennsylvania.
Yes, that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the period for morning business be extended until 7 p.m. with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
And I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to, we're in morning business, correct, you said?
The senator is correct. We are in morning business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Products that are labeled made in China can be found in our cars, in our closets, in our cupboards. So too are the ingredients in the foods we eat often, the medicine we take, the candy our children enjoy, the toys they play with. But how many times do we hear in the last few years of illness and death from contaminated foods or drugs or toys that are made in China? In Toledo, Ohio, patients died after taking contaminated heparin to treat their heart conditions. Drug manufacturers have acknowledged that they turn to countries like China to buy ingredients to put into pharmaceuticals. U.S. companies often move production to China, buy ingredients there, put these drugs together, sell them back into the United States with ingredients that may not pass some of the safety inspections that they should. One company acknowledged that 17% of its active ingredients in manufacturing are outsourced, often to countries with weaker drug safety standards. When high lead levels were discovered in toys several years ago, I urged stronger oversight to help keep our children safe. 4 years ago, I asked Dr. Jeffrey Weidenhamer of Ashland University in north central Ohio to test lead. He had already begun testing with his students. We asked him to do it again, to test the lead level in Halloween toys, including the cups and the buckets that Ohio children would be eating out of and decorations families would be using that children often put into their mouths during the holidays. He tested products in the fall of 2007 for Halloween, in the spring for Easter toys of 2008. He identified 12 of 97 products were contaminated with high quantities, much higher than what's considered safe by our government, high lead contents on this lead-based paint on our toys. Among them, candy buckets, drinking cups, fake teeth, other Halloween props. At Easter, it was eggs and baskets and other things. It included products bought at leading national retailers. At the same time, it was clear that our trading system, patterned in many ways with businesses following this business plan of shutting down production in places like Rhode Island, where the presiding officer represents, in Ohio, shutting down production in our country and moving it to China, manufacturing there and selling products back here. That trade system has failed basic consumer and public safety standards. There's nothing free about trade that puts children in the hospital for playing with a toy or eating candy or brushing their teeth. That's why Congress passed the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. The act sent a simple message to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. It's charged with protecting consumers, protect American children, protect families, protect companies from unsafe and possibly fatal products. That job's gotten a lot harder to protect the American public on food products, on toys, on pharmaceuticals, and in a moment on pet food, which I'll discuss, because the business plan for so many companies has been shut down production in Canton, Ohio, and move it to Guangzhou, China. Shut down production in Toledo or Dayton, Ohio, and move it to Wuhan or Xi'an, China, in order to save money, in order to cut worker safety costs, in order to evade environmental and consumer regulations sometimes. The new law that we passed meant that hundreds of thousands of toys and food and other imports from China and elsewhere can be recalled when they are unsafe. The key is inspection of these products, and the key is making the companies that outsource the jobs to China in order to save money, making them liable. We don't want more court cases, more litigation, but if these companies are going to move production to China, they need to take responsibility for the lead. If there's lead on the toys, if the toys have been painted with lead-based paint, they need to take responsibility for the pharmaceutical ingredients, sometimes dangerous ingredients that somebody has somehow put in these pharmaceuticals when production comes from China. They need to be careful about food safety. They need to be careful about treats for pets that have been contaminated. That act has been a success. Last year, Dr. Weidenhamer conducted another test and found no products with painted Halloween items. Found no problems, found no lead-based paint contamination. But there's a gap in our trade system that threatens public health and public safety. We passed a law to close that gap. Public safety benefits. Companies are still able to make and sell their products in this free market. 1 year ago, Congress passed, the President signed into law, the Bipartisan Food Safety Modernization Act. The law provides the FDA with the tools needed to better protect our food supply, to recall tainted or adulterated food, and to respond more effectively to foodborne illness outbreaks. It empowered the FDA with new authority to establish a traceability system. That is, when a product comes to your table, whether it's food, in this case, a pharmaceutical, whether it's a toy, the company that sells that product needs to be able to trace back all the ingredients, all the components, where they came from, how were they produced, under what conditions they were produced. It empowered, it's that type of public safety infrastructure that's so important. Yet, as we've seen with food and toys and drugs imported from China, now we're seeing it with pet food. Yesterday I met with Kevin Thaxton in Cuyahoga County, the Cleveland area, whose wife Candace wrote to me after one of their dogs, a pug, I believe a 9-year-old pug, died from kidney failure. They thought it was the pug simply getting older. Pugs, I had a pug once, don't usually live much beyond 10 years. They then found, as they got another dog, got sick immediately, they figured out it was likely from eating Chinese-made chicken jerky treats. At the time, they didn't make the connection. Until the second dog, they didn't make connection between the pet food and the pet illness. With the other puppy, the second puppy had a life-threatening illness after eating the same product. Another Ohioan, Terry Safranek, joined us at our meeting yesterday, 2 days ago, Terry lost her 9-year-old Fox Terrier earlier this year. She did not realize that tainted chicken jerky treat could be responsible for her dog's death until she saw the Thaxton story in the evening news. These two families, the Thaxtons and the Safranics, in the 62% of U.S. households who own a pet, shouldn't have to worry about the safety of the food they give their pets. It's an example, again, of a trade issue transforming into a safety issue. Now, again, to explain this, Mr. President, that so many companies in the U.S., as part of their business plan, decide in order to save money, in order to evade consumer protection laws and food safety laws and worker safety laws and environmental laws, or for whatever reason, they move their production to China with significantly cheaper labor. They shut down in Columbus or Cincinnati, Ohio. They move to China to manufacture these products. They sell back into the U.S. Probably unprecedented in economic or world history, where companies shut down one place, move overseas, produce the same items, sell them back into the home market. We know with that whole trade regiment, that whole construct of that business plan of shutting down production, moving overseas, selling back in, there are significant health and safety problems. Again, there are problems with lead-based paint. There are problems with other consumer items safety. There's problems with food safety. There's problems with pharmaceutical contamination ingredients, and now there are problems with pet foods. The Food and Drug Administration has logged more than 350 reports of pet illnesses thought to be connected to chicken jerky treats made in China. Although the FDA has already issued a warning about illness, they have not yet for sure identified a contaminant. The treats remain on market shelves in stores across the country. I would never on this Senate floor suggest people buy something or boycott something else. I would suggest, though, that people look at the product when they buy something for their pet and they look where it's made and make the judgment based on that. I'm calling on the FDA to accelerate its investigation of the imported pet food, especially food imported from China, where the possibility of food contamination is higher. That's the FDA's job. Earlier this week, I sent a letter to Dr. Hamburg, the FDA commissioner, urging her agency to act swiftly to make sure that products found to be helpful are pulled from retail outlets. I've asked the FDA to improve its notification system so pet owners know about items under investigation for pet food safety breaches. The FDA should promptly pursue efforts to find the contaminant in these pet treats and ensure they are pulled from store shelves to prevent any unnecessary pet deaths. Contaminated toys, hard-to-trace medical ingredients, now pet food have all forced Americans to turn to the government to ensure the safety of the products we import. Now, it's a problem with trade law that we have set this up to happen far too often. It's an example of when government works, when we stepped in on lead-based paint and kept these products off the market and made sure that products coming in now are safer because we passed the Consumer Protection revision. It shows that government stepping in the right way can make a difference in the lives, saving the lives of children, protecting people's pets, protecting pharmaceuticals, making sure that pharmaceutical safety is guaranteed as much as possible. We've been down this road before. There's nothing free about trade that undermines basic health rules. There's nothing free about trade that weakens safety rules, the very rules that help keep food safe to eat, water and air safe to drink and to breathe. The FDA should take action now to protect American pet owners from tainted products that can harm the health of their pets. It's been a long time victory for the American people that the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we take, the toys we buy for our children, the treats we buy for our pets. We have done a good job in this country in the last several decades of the government partnering with businesses to make sure these products are generally safe for our families, for ourselves, for our children, for our pets. Now, because of these holes in our trade laws that encourage companies to go overseas and produce products, sell them back here, clearly has undermined so much of what we've done, accomplished bipartisanly for so many years for the health and safety of the American public. It shows the role of government can be important. It shows that we do know how to do this to protect our families. Mr. President, I urge the FDA to step in here on this issue and help American families. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Jesse Absol. Oh, I'm sorry. I take it.